What is up, YouTube? If you guys can't tell, it is blistering hot in North Carolina right now. I am absolutely drenched. But I'm back. And I don't know when I'm gonna be back again after this one, because you know how I am if you've been here long enough. But right now, I'm gonna try to make a YouTube video. So, first things first, I gotta get something out of the way here. I've been holding out on you guys. I've been busy. If you can't tell what's going on, GSP's got a shop. We finally put it together, helping my parents and my lovely wife and awesome building company. And basically last year, end of last year, December-ish, we put up a shop, and it's not massive, but it's pretty darn big for one guy in a garage. And yeah, I'm playing a little harder than I once was. My personal cars are in here right now because I'm being a little selfish and I want to like do some cool stuff with them before I start throwing some extra stuff in here. And I'm not going crazy with it. I'm gonna do like kind of have a rule of one car at a time, because if not, I'll end up with a parking lot out here, and I don't want that. But yeah, so I'm gonna hopefully be working on some cool stuff, and that way I'll get to do some YouTube videos, and that'll be on my own stuff, and that'll be on some customer cars. That is some stuff that I don't normally play with, like automatic transmissions, which segues me perfectly into today's topic, which is these guys. So I don't usually do mechanical stuff. Usually it's all like tuning related, and well, heck, I get dirty too, and I wanted to do a video on what I'm working on. And what I'm working on right now is going to be the transmission for a future project that is going to be hinted at, but I'm not going to quite reveal all the details just yet. But I got two things going on here. I got two T56s, two transmissions. I got one F-body spec T56 that is actually faceplated, and I would like to go into some of the details of faceplating and how it's done and what it is exactly, because I think it gets confused with a dog ring gearbox, which, while they operate the same and behave the same, they're very different, and I'll explain why. And then also I've got a stock T56 from a Z06 Corvette, which is not mine. This is my spare, which is why we got to go dig into it. And it was previously hurt and needs an output shaft. And I have got a amp distributing upgraded 8620 30 spline Corvette output shaft that needs to be put in this thing. And so that's the two projects. That's what we got to work on. What I'm probably going to do here, for the sake of not mixing up parts and the fact that I've only got one transmission stand, is I'm probably going to do these one at a time, and I'll point out the differences between a traditional synchronized transmission and a faceplated transmission. And one thing that's cool about the F-body T56 versus the Corvette T56 stock is that the F-body is a dual cone synchro and the Corvette is a triple cone synchro. And the TR6060s are also triple cone, and they're an upgraded synchro. So I don't have one of those sitting here right now, but I'll at least be able to show you the difference between a single cone, or dual cone, sorry, and a triple cone. So, okay, I'm gonna start getting one of these on the stand, and I'll be back shortly with something hopefully kind of cool. And more than likely, this is going to take me more than like this afternoon to do. So you'll see some wardrobe changes and some less sweaty Aaron here at some point, I'm sure. And maybe not. It's supposed to be hot for days. But yeah, time to get into it. The first good news is that our donor Corvette transmission has got excellent looking fluid in it. So hopefully we have got nothing more than a swap a shaft and go. All right, guys, so I've got the transmission is drained, and I took the front pump off of the front, which is this guy right here. That's a Corvette specific thing. Just ignore this junk right there. Okay, So we got a Corvette specific pump here that is now out of the way, and I would like to introduce you to the transmission stand / mock-up block 9000. I stumbled into this, and I'm sorry that the floor looks so unbelievably messy, but this is what happens whenever this is the second transmission I built, which is technically the third because I made one transmission out of two the other night, and so it's filthy, but that's all right. The block is my mock-up block for building cars, and that's why it's got some weird small block Chevy motor mounts with some adapter plates on it right now. But what's super awesome about this rig is that not only is it your mock-up block, but it's aluminum, so it's nice to lift and move around, and it's also non-marring for your really anything aluminum or harder, which is very convenient. And what's really cool is that if you stick the input shaft of a manual transmission down the cam tunnel, and even the Corvette stuff fits through this little window right here, that's the shift shaft that comes through there, and so all it fits, and you have yourself a nice transmission stand that also doubles as your mock-up block for whenever you got to figure out where the motor is going to go in the car. So I'm gonna try to get like a time lapse going here, and I'm gonna bust this thing apart, and we'll talk about some stuff along the way if it's interesting. So, all right. All right, well, Tremec put those bolts in extremely tight for this. I guess we'd call it the counter shaft extension housing. But let's stop and take a look at a few things. So paper gasket means more than likely this is Tremec built, which is pretty cool. It means it's, you know, somebody hasn't been inside of here messing with stuff. Obviously we got a broken output shaft, that's why we're in here. For those that may not know, this is where your 5th, 6th, and reverse are housed. So this is actually reverse, and the way that it works is the reverse idler gear that's in this housing is what actually acts on the counter shaft. And so this gear and this gear, instead of meshing, there's an idler in between them, which is what makes it go the opposite direction. Counter shaft and main shaft means that this down here is your 6th gear, this right here is your 5th gear, and this is going to be your synchronizer then for 5th and 6th, and then this is going to be your synchronizer and shift ring for reverse. So I'm going to put the camera back up, and I guess we'll just keep on digging until we run out of stuff. This is where it starts to get a little fun, because you got a lot of these snap rings that, quite frankly, are sometimes a little beastly, and they like to shoot across the room and such. So, all right, we'll get rolling here. One other thing that's kind of halfway cool is that Corvettes, the Z06s, have got a one-piece counter shaft. So this all comes off, where in the F-body stuff, like for instance, you don't get that. You get a counter shaft extension, which this is a 1 through 4 counter shaft, and that extension is driven off of these drive lugs in the back. So one of those deals, theoretically slightly stronger. Not real sure that you need to be doing power. Not sure we need to be doing power pulls in 5th and 6th, but if you're so inclined, at least it's a one-piece shaft. All right, guys, so got the drive off of the counter shaft for reverse idler. And I pulled the snap ring off of the reverse gear on the main shaft, and it spins, and I can clearly tell that it is separate. Maybe I am making a little progress, but anyway, it doesn't want to come off, and I know very well from plenty of experience not to force this thing. So it is blazing hot out here. I'm exhausted, and I think I'm gonna go take a shower and get ready for dinner, because it's currently Father's Day 2024, and I'm gonna go hang out with my kids, and hopefully they're up from nap by now, and we'll see what happens. So I'm sure I will be back out here in the coming nights or evenings to keep tinkering with this thing, and eventually I'll have a YouTube video's worth of stuff done to it and it'll be worth watching. So, all right, until next time. All right, so I did exactly what I told you not to do the last clip that we had on here, and I went ahead and got a wild hair and was like, you know what, I want this gear off. And it turns out this is the reverse gear that I was talking about that was sitting right here. It turns out that it took exactly what I said not to do, which is pry it off. And I'll be honest, I'm a little unsure of why. I can see maybe a little bit of something where it was tight on here. I gotta do some more investigating on this, but short version is I had to pry it off, and I shouldn't have had to pry it off. It should float. It spun freely. That was not a problem. I really don't know why I had to pry that off, but nonetheless, here we are. Went ahead and pulled the end of the counter shaft off, the drive for the reverse gear off of that, and next thing I got to get off of here is this 5th, 6th main shaft gear. And a lot of times, especially on the F-body T56s, this gear will slip right off. It's no big deal. It's not supposed to slip off. It is supposed to be pressed on there. And in this case, which is actually, I think, good news, a lot of times you'll see that they're worn quite a bit. This one's solid. I've tried everything I could think of to gently pull it off of there without any additional help, and it's not going. So I made up these extensions for my 3-jaw puller, and I'm hoping they're going to be the right length, that will place the puller at such a height that we can pull this thing off of there. So I'm going to get this assembled up and throw the time lapse on, and we'll see what happens. Should be funny either way. All right, guys, I had to do a little bit of off-camera fighting. I try not to do that, but when you get into a situation where you have no idea how long you're gonna be working on it, sometimes you gotta stop and figure out what the heck's going on. I suspect that this transmission got a touch hot at some point, and I say that because I got some bearings that have just the slightest little gold tint to them, and everything came apart on this thing with an absolute fight. I chipped a couple of teeth. I'm not real proud of that, but they chipped what I would consider relatively easily. So I'm not really sure what to think of that, but like for instance, on our 5th, 6th here, I got a little chipped tooth, and on 6th gear here, if I can find it, I got a small chip. Struggling to find it. It's really tiny. So basically, there it is. See that little chip right there? There's what you should do and there's what I'm gonna do. You should replace it. What I'm gonna do is probably deburr all the edges on those teeth and feather them in where they're never gonna be a problem in theory. And part of the reason I'm willing to do that is because it is 5th and 6th. If it was 1 through 4 and I knew I was going to be hitting them under power, I probably would reconsider that. But I am never going to hit 5th and 6th under power in this car. If I do that, I have completely lost my mind. So this is for my C6Z, so it'll do about 170 in 4th gear, I'm pretty sure, maybe 160, something like that. I know that mathematically, if you get my drift. So anyway, nothing too crazy. This is where that 5th 6 was. I'm gonna clean that up really well. Everything else looks fine. I feel like, based on everything I'm seeing in this thing, it feels low mile to me. It does seem like it got a little warm. I don't know if it's gonna come through on camera, but there's just this ever so slight little gold tinge to this deal. Doesn't really make a ton of sense to me because the Corvettes had coolers on them, so like, I don't know what I'm thinking here. I can definitely see where the bearings rode. I got to think long and hard if I want to replace them, because that requires a significant amount more work. And I'm not afraid of work, but I do have bazillion projects going on. And what I was really hoping to do is zip this thing apart, make a quick video out of it, swap the main shaft. That's why this thing's apart, because, you know, we had the broken main shaft. And what I did have to do is, to get the puller on the 5th 6 to pull that off, ended up having to cut the main shaft off flat and actually used a drill and dimpled it so that the puller had somewhere to ride in. But yeah, so I need to give some of these parts a bath and do the reverse operation. So I need to get a main shaft. I'm probably going to go over to a buddy's place and use his press, because I don't have a press in here yet. We'll see how easily I can get the main shaft apart. Kind of something wild on these things that just blows my mind. I do need to get a bearing for this thing. I just realized that. You can kind of tell that that bearing has seen better days. The race doesn't really look that bad, honestly. It's got fluid in there, but that looks like it got hot to me. Okay, so what I was saying was that something that's kind of cool about these things is the way that this comes apart. Is the only thing holding this on is this little tiny O-ring right here that I'm gonna have to put the camera down to be able to get off of there. But it's just this little rubber O-ring, and then this bearing comes off and the gear comes off, and then the slider hubs are pressed on at that point with some snap rings. But anyway, kind of a cool setup, and we'll get some stuff with this thing going back together after we get a main shaft. All right, guys, I got it all blown apart. You probably saw me in the time lapse actually get the main shaft assembly apart. Usually it takes a press for that, but I used my mock-up block to my advantage and my 3-jaw puller to my advantage. And so now, this is what we got. This is a Ant Distributing '8620 main shaft. There you have it. And I ordered a new bearing for the front of the main shaft last night, and kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what we're working with here and how much shorter this one is now that I had to cut it off. Keep in mind that I just cut the brake off. Like, it broke quite a bit of the splines off the back of this thing. So yeah, I just gotta do the opposite, right? Put it back the other way and keep on trucking. So that said, I'm gonna go ahead and throw the time lapse up and get started. I'll real quick, I'll kind of hit a highlight here of kind of how the synchro deal works. If you look at this thing, there's this friction material, and then there's a cone on the gear. And if you have like an F-body style T56, then the only thing you get is the gear and one cone and the outer ring. And that outer ring is what has these little small lineup teeth on it. Those little small lineup teeth are meant to line up with the teeth that are on the gear. When the slider locks into the gear, then you're locked into the gear, right? And these things are meant to kind of slip and slide and put the brakes on the gear until they line up, and then click, you go into gear. But that would be what you get on a dual cone setup. What you get with this thing, with the T56, or the TR6060 and the T56 are triple cone. The Corvette's got the triple cone, I think, honestly, because of all of the additional mass, rotating mass of the drive shaft being on the input side of the transmission versus the output. So you got a lot more mass to slow down and speed up when you're going to change gears. But the way that this works, it's funny because like it adds a not insignificant amount of complexity, right? Like typically you just have one ring, and then you have the tooth ring here. But when you do this, now you got to put another set of frictions on. When you add that set of frictions, those frictions somehow have to be locked to the gear in order for them to work, right? If not, they're just spinning and it's like they're not even there. So they have these little lugs that lock into the gear, right? And this goes for 5th and 6th as well. And this stuff, man, this stuff starts getting really small. Like, here's your 5th, 6th stuff. You got to have this spline tooth assembly to go into this friction ring to make all this work. So there's a lot of these little tiny little hard parts that you got to keep up with. So obviously I'll lay them all out on the table, and you can see here, like, you got toothed rings here that intersect with the inner ring. All this stuff has to be able to lock up on itself in order for this situation to actually work. But it's kind of cool because if you apply pressure, man, it's locked down. Like, it's not, those frictions are really good even if they're oily, and then you let up on it and, you know, it'll spin. Kind of super cool. But anyway, that's how that works. Other thing that you'll kind of notice as you get going with one of these things is it looks really complicated, but it's not. It's really kind of simple. You got some kind of thrust face, right? You got thrust face here. We got a gear that rides here. We've got a hub that rides here that holds a synchronizer, and that's got to have a snap ring on it. I know that because that is just how these things are stacked up. You got to hold the hub in place somehow. And the way that the hub is held in place is it bottoms out on this shoulder, and it's got the snap ring that goes right here. And that's just has to be that way. And then the gear actually thrusts itself based on where the hub is at and where the actual thrust face on this shaft is ground at. And then the same kind of stack up happens on the other side. You got thrust face where the gear rides, and then you got the hub that slides on and has a snap ring. And it just is what it is. That's how they have to go together, and that's the way that the counter shaft works too. Like, can't get away from it. So when you break it down into that little simplicity, it's actually quite a bit easier to do, because you know, if you think about what you're doing, you know where you have to have a snap ring for it to work. Yeah, you got to keep up with some shims and make sure you put some things back in the right place, but the easiest thing to do there is when you take it apart, just keep up with where that stuff goes. Do what I've done here. All of my assemblies, individual assemblies, I've laid them all out, so I know that those parts go with those parts, and I know where they go. It looks like a massive mess, but I actually know where they go because everything's laid out in order down the cart as if the main shaft was actually laying on the cart. So, all right, I'm gonna attempt to get to this and throw the time lapse up. Wish me luck. Well, I lost. You guys probably saw the time lapse of me beating the snot out of this thing with every hammer I could find. And I went to the store because this is really what you need, and I didn't have one, and I should have had one, but was being cheap, and yeah, had enough. So I'm going to attempt to press this thing on here, and I have no idea what's about to happen, but I have a theory of what should happen. So we shall see. This is very tight. It's not supposed to be this tight. I'm not totally shocked, being that this is an aftermarket part, but this is not supposed to be this crazy tight. All right, so this is one part that's really crucial. You have to line all of this up if you're gonna do it this way, upside down. There's this little groove that follows the key, and this will all sit down flush as long as that's there. If you press it in with the ring like that, you'll have an awful day. That's got to be there. That drive lug's got to be there. All this will stack up in that manner whenever it's seated all the way down to this thrust land. So let's see what happens. Watch it just be like butter to the level of the press. Alright, that's quite a bit on it. I think we're moving. That is more on it than I wish I had to put. Feels like we're stopped. All right, well, I got to put the camera down and make sure that everything's good. This is one of those things that is unbelievably frustrating, and I will be totally honest. This is one of the hardest ones I've ever had to do, but you got to go slow. You can't rush this. If you do, you'll end up with broken parts and a bad day. So, all right, camera down, and I'm gonna get this put on. All right, so just like that, turns out that the right tool for the job makes this a very short affair. This second one hopped right on. When I was pressing on the front hub here for 3/4, I had the shaft just barely catching on the block on the press, and that was why it went solid in the video. As soon as I got that out of the way and had both hands, no problem at all. That slipped right on. This thing slipped right on the same way, no problem at all. And I went ahead and popped the sliders on, and really, aside from the front bearing here that's in the nail, that's actually what's holding me up right now. That front bearing rides in the back of your input shaft here. As soon as I get that bearing installed, I'll be ready to put this whole thing actually back together. But while I got the opportunity here and this thing sitting here, give you guys kind of a little bit of an idea what goes on. I can't show you fourth gear, because if I show you fourth gear, this slider is going to want to try to come all the way off the front, and I don't want to do that and scatter parts everywhere because it's spring loaded. Basically, your input shaft is your 1-to-1 fourth gear, right? So when this locks up, it actually locks the main shaft to the input shaft right here, and when that happens, you got 1-to-1, that's fourth gear. But say, like, for instance, first gear, you can kind of get an idea of exactly how this works. If I pull this slider back, this is unbelievably difficult to do. with one hand. Give me 1 second. 2 hands makes it easy. So you can see that this hub now locks to the gear. This gear engages the counter shaft right here, and then therefore this ratio, right, whatever this difference is in diameter, effectively pitch diameter, is what gives you your ratio, and that's what gives you first gear. So if I attempt to pop this out, it's equally as difficult to come out of gear one-handed. There we go. Okay, all right, so there's neutral again. Free spin, so that was first. And here's second gear, maybe. 1 second. So easy to do with 2 hands, okay? So now second gear is locked. Same thing happens. This intersects this gear when it's in the case. In the case, you have this mesh going on, right? And so what you effectively have here is the power transmission comes in the cluster gear from the input shaft, goes to the cluster gear on the counter shaft, and then this counter shaft runs its speed based on this relationship to start with. So that relationship plus that relationship is what gives you whatever your ratio is. And obviously, when you lock it up 1-to-1, then all of these gears are freewheeling, and the counter shaft is also freewheeling. So that is your least parasitic situation, and that's why you typically dyno in 4th gear if you can, is because you got the least amount of gear friction going on in that situation. All this stuff's just freewheeling, no big deal. So I got to get this bearing in, and then I got to get this input shaft cleaned up, and we'll put it back in the front plate, and I'm just going to start putting pieces in one by one. There probably will be a time lapse of that, and I'll show you how the shifter mechanism goes on and all that jazz. And yeah, cool deal. Till next time, get the right tools, guys. Get the right tools. Go ahead, like if you're at this point in the video, go ahead and leave me a comment if I have sufficiently convinced you to never build a T56 ever again. I don't know why this one has been so difficult. They're actually not that hard. This one has, I think it got hot. Like I said, it has absolutely fought me. Even going back together with a new main shaft, it has fought me. So, all right, enough complaining. We'll get to it. All right, guys. Got my front bearing put on the front of the main shaft. That's a 2-handed affair, so I didn't really capture it, but obviously put it in the press it on with a little spacer, make sure it's fully seated, and off we go. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw the camera up, throw the time lapse up. You know, we already talked a little bit about the sliders and how they engage the gears and how they pick these little tiny teeth, and the slider engages on the tooth of the gear to lock it up. And so now, reverse of the previous time lapse, with hopefully less banging with sledgehammers and less torch work, but just reverse of the disassembly. You gotta put it all back together. This is one of those jobs, I will go ahead and just admit, it's fidgety. Like, there's lots of little tiny pieces that all have to land in just the right place, and they all got to go together kind of like at the same time, and it's one big mesh that has to happen. And there's a lot of taking it out and putting it back, and taking it out and putting it back. Like, probably going to do that a couple times. So anyway, all right, all that said, I'm going to get to it, and wish me luck. used a sledgehammer more than I'm proud, but I think we're there. Everything's in except for the rear cover, and I gotta clean that thing up, so I may not get it on tonight, honestly. I'm at 2% battery on the camera, so. Alright guys, if you've made it this far into the video, you deserve an award. It's done, it's complete, everything is off the cart, and we are ready to put this back in the car, or into the car at some point whenever I take it out and do a clutch. I probably should have done a little better job making it clean, but I'll be honest with you, it's going to be underneath the underside of a Corvette and never going to see the light of day. So I'm struggling to really put a whole lot of effort into that. The important part is clean. Inside is clean. Gasket surfaces are clean. All right, it's been a lot of days, but there is the official completed final product waiting to go back in the car. And we've got the next project sitting here on the stand. Again, apologies for the mess. I'm still moving in and out of this place. We got a whole bunch of construction stuff to go out and a whole bunch of car stuff to come in, and I got to put shelves up and all that crap. So anyway, let's do a little recap real quick. That build was a little tough. I'll just be honest. It was probably maybe the toughest T56 I've ever built. I don't know why, but stuff did not want to come apart, and it did not want to go back together. And typically I like that the unit's tight and that it's, you know, really well fitted, but this one was just a touch too tight. I think the 5th, 6th main shaft gears, I feel like they had fluid behind them, and at some point they got hot, and that fluid kind of caked up, turned into carbon, and I could see behind that gear that it had a lot of junk back there that was really holding that gear on, and it made it super tough to get that thing off. Made it tricky to get back on, honestly. I tried cleaning it up, but apparently I didn't do a good enough job, and then that's kind of one of those deals whenever it's halfway down and it gets stuck, I just went for it. I knew pulling it back off wouldn't really gain me a whole lot. So used a sledgehammer for the first time on a T56. That's more hammering than I really would have preferred to do. I tried to go light taps and not try to get too much motion all at once. Light taps and you know, knock those gears back on. The press was absolutely necessary to get it back together. I somehow fought the main shaft apart, or the output shaft apart. But man, that brand new amp shaft, there was no way that I was going to get those hubs on there by force. It was going to have to be with the press, so with impact, I should say. Anyway, if you made it this far in the video, I can't thank you enough. I'm not doing this for me. This is tougher on me, honestly. It's really tricky to record everything and set up a camera and stop to talk to the camera and all that stuff. I want to do this because I really want to help somebody. I want somebody to see that this is how it comes apart. This is how it goes back together. I feel like this video probably wasn't as good as it could have been in terms of instruction. I wasn't really going for that. I was really going for how does it work. Because the reality of it is you're going to have to get one and take it apart. Best thing you can do if you're trying to learn engines or you're trying to learn transmissions or anything like that is get one that you're willing to not get back together and take it apart, take pictures, record everything as you can for your own use, and see if you can get it back together, right? T56s look so much worse than they are. The moment that you realize that there's a certain like way that they stack up, it's thrust face, bearing behind the gear, and then the gear is going to have a synchronizer, a blocker assembly, and a slider hub and a snap ring. that's all one little contained unit. It has to be that way. Slider hub goes over the slider ring goes over the slider hub, and then you get another assembly of the synchronizer. You got the blocker rings and cones and all that stuff, your next gear, and then you got to have some sort of thrust face, whether it's a bearing. Usually it's typically a bearing on either side, or in the case of the front of the main shaft, there is a bearing on the main shaft, but the snap ring is what holds the hub in. Then that bearing is very small, goes inside of the input shaft. But where I'm going with this is that either way, that gear has to be thrust controlled on either side. So you know, if you don't have something that keeps that gear in place, it's not right. Take it back apart and do it again. Also, don't be like me and try to make a YouTube video and try to be cute and row it through the gears with the back of the case off. The countershaft extension housing was off whenever I tried to do that. It's not in the video because it did not work. You can't do that because the shift rail is unsupported at the back, and I was sitting there fighting the thing on camera, and I took it out. It was horrible. But don't be like me. I just put the thing all the way together, and then it'll row through the gears extremely easy. What else? I think that's about it. The thing that I want to get across in this video, like I said, if you made it this far, you deserve an award. But main thing I want to get across is that it can be done. You'll need a couple of specialty tools to be able to do it, but it can be done pretty easy with a little bit of time and not rushing anything, and hopefully a YouTube video to go off of so you can kind of see how it comes apart. The clearances that I always use on counter shafts is I want to see like 0 to 2 thousandths of preload, as in just barely clamping that thing. You don't want it to be able to slide fore and aft. And then on the main shaft, excuse me, it does need a little bit of clearance. I usually aim for like 1 to 3 on a main shaft. I didn't go through all of that mess on this thing just because I was just swapping that main shaft out. I made sure that it was tight, and that's good enough for this one. You'll notice I take the front plate off a couple of times, and that's what I'm doing, is reshimming that stack just to make sure that that stack up is tight. You don't want the input to be wobbly or anything. You'll have trouble shifting, because every time you go to grab a gear one direction, the whole assembly will have to move forward, and then the whole assembly will have to move backward. Makes for a mess. Trying to get it shift makes for a mess on the floor too, because you likely are going to have seal issues that way. Anyway, I think I've rambled enough. Thank you for watching this. This is a super long video for me. Please let me know if this is something that's halfway interesting. If it is, then I think I could probably do a little more production quality on it and probably get a little better at it with time and make it something worthwhile. And if you guys want 5-minute tuning tutorials, if that's what the world wants, then that's what I'll give. So you guys just gotta let me know in the comments what is interesting. So, all right, I'm gonna get it wrapped up. Everybody have a wonderful day, and I don't know when I'll see you next, but I hope it's gonna be with this faceplated T56 disassembly. We're gonna swap a main shaft on it as well. Give me a good opportunity to talk about the differences between a synchronized assembly and a faceplated assembly. So, on to the next one.